Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Open Access in Asia, Not a Cookie Cutter Approach. We are very honored to have two renowned industry experts as our speakers today, Mr. Mazmi, University Librarian at University Malaysia Police, and Mr. Kreis, University Librarian at Hong Kong Baptist University. They will share their invaluable insights and practical experience on open access in Asia. Linda and Annika from Gold Leaf will be our moderators today. They will give a full introduction to our speakers later.
Thank you.
Yeah, before we begin, there will be a few housekeeping notes. Your audio and the video will be turned off. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. This session will be recorded. Both the slides and the recording will be sent to you after the webinar. If you have any question not answered during the webinar, please email marketing@greaterbrill.com. If you have audio issues, please check your settings and re-enter the session again. Then I will hand over to Linda and Annika. Thank you again for being here, and please enjoy the session. I will stop sharing. And Linda, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. I'm just going to ask Annika to introduce herself because she'll be doing most of the behind the scenes work, including fielding your questions, but you won't actually see her for very much longer. So Annika, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Annika Bennett from Gold Leaf. So Linda and I run these webinars together. So this is one of a series. Welcome everybody, and nice to meet you all, and our speakers particularly. So as Linda said, I will be in the background answering questions in the chat and helping and stepping in if there are any technical issues, which hopefully won't be necessary. But I will, once the session has properly started, I will be invisible and switch my camera off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Annika. Now, advocates of open access, and that includes publishers, say that in order for it to succeed, it's got to be adopted the whole world over. But as we have already discovered, or as open access has evolved, there are many different interpretations of it, and I don't think there can be a country in the world that hasn't put its own stamp on it. And now that open access is becoming a common concept in Asia, Asian countries are no different. They are adopting a different approach according to their circumstances and according to the needs, of course, of the library patrons. So we're very fortunate today to have two very expert advocates of open access to talk to us about how open access has been adopted or is being adopted in two Asian countries. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mazmin Matakhir, who, as Cindy's already said, is the librarian at the University of Perlis in Malaysia. Mazmin has written a great deal about open access, including several books about it. And she also heads up one of the wings of the Concept Consortium in Malaysia. So she is very well placed to talk to us today about her experiences and what her plans are for the next few years. So Mazmin, would you like to share your presentation, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for the introduction. So, good afternoon from Malaysia, and thank you everyone for having me and Chris today in this webinar. So my title today will be Better Together, the Malaysian Consortium Approach to Open Access. So I think I would like to give an overview of the Malaysian Higher Education Electronic Resources Consortium. In Malaysia, we call it CONSAP. It was established by the Ministry of Higher Education in 2019. And immediately after, after its establishment in 2019, we actually made an effort to help its official launch in April 2020. As you can see, this is during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the official launch actually marking a key milestone in its development, where we start to introduce concept, roles and functions to our stakeholders. And following the April 2020 launching, the consortium grew to include 20 public universities in Malaysia and 4 government-linked universities. And I believe the private universities, they have their own setup for a consortium. So in here, we only include 24 institutions. And our primary goal is to optimize the utilization of resources and expertise, because we wanted the consortium to deal on behalf of the 20 public universities, and we also wanted the optimization of financial resources for all the 24 institutions. And the coverage, actually how we decide on the databases or the resources that concept going to deal or to provide to the members is based on the 20 public universities chief librarians input. We had a workshop on direction of electronic resources in higher education. So we have a list of electronic resources that need to critically needed by institutions, but concept only deal about the top resources that required by the 20 public universities. And good thing about concept is we have an entity at the Department of Higher Education Malaysia, the Center for Citation and Informatics, actually looking at the development and the progress of concept. I think they are playing a very important role to shape how concept grow, and the dealing and the connection with the ministry is very strong through their role and function. So concept achievement and progress, yeah, I think it's still very young for concept, about 5 years to 6 years age. But if you look at the diagram here, we have a concept Way Forward 2023, which also included sort of open access elements on OER, open research data, and we have this also on open access publishing. So this is part of Way Forward for concept. Not only concept dealing with the negotiation or acquisition of electronic resources, but we do also influence on how the open access initiatives will grow in Malaysia. So in a way, concept offers a consortium model to major databases subscribed to by the Malaysian public universities and the 4 GLUs. In 2019, concept incorporated both the read and publish model and the transformative agreement into its strategic direction. So what we do in the current initiative on transformative agreement or read and publish is not by accident. We actually plan it properly and present this on the second phase of the implementation. Concept will be focusing on read and publish and transformative agreement. And regarding the transformative agreement, we developed the framework for the first transformative agreement with Sringer Nature. When concept mention a framework, it means that it is not a ready model. When we first look at the proposed model, and in 2023, and we started develop our own framework to ensure that all the 24 institutions will buy in the framework according to their ecosystem in the university. And in Read and Publish initiative, in 2025, CONCEPT will collaborate with selected publishers for the transition from read subscription to Read and Publish, involving around 14 to 20 public and government-linked universities. And we are yet to see the final input from all our stakeholders. This is an article appeared regarding the Springer Nature Science National Open Access Agreement for Malaysia. This was said I think the biggest in Southeast Asia, because it involves 20 Malaysian public universities in 2025 alone, and in 2026 we have participation from government-linked universities. So overall now the transformative agreement for Springer is contributing by 21 universities in Malaysia. So this is the first CONCEPT transformative agreement, and I believe it is not because we only wanted to have an agreement, a transformative agreement with Springer, but we do acquire transformative agreement from other publishers as well. But yet we have challenges on coming into a good proposal and offer. Most important part of the 20 public universities, the challenging part is the 20 public universities comprises of different clusters of universities. We have research universities, a very high intensity research activity. We have comprehensive universities. We have focus universities and technical universities. So whatever resources that CONCEPT wanted to deal with related to the 20 public universities must be something that offer multidisciplinary, so that it can be optimized by all the 20 public universities and the 4 government-linked universities. And we are very proud to announce that before we have the transformative agreement, the reading provision only for 7 institutions, and the subscriptions are diverse from titles to package and to collection. But after the transformative agreement, we actually provide equal access to complete package of Springer to 20 institutions in 2025 and 21 institutions in 2026. And publishing is always an argument when you have transformative agreement, because we start discussing on how many publishing quota for my university, and we are talking about 21 universities in one model. What we do is we create a framework that the publishing is a publishing or open access articles number is aligned, is according to institutional capability. We don't force universities that can't publish much to publish certain number. So this is based on the 3 years average publication achieved by the institutions. And before we reach into the consensus and the final agreement, publishing agreement, we have numerous numbers of meetings. And our meetings are not only with the chief librarians or the serious librarians. We have meetings with other important stakeholders like the Research and Management Center, researchers themselves, and Ministry of Higher Education, Department of Higher Education in a way. So what we learned from our first transformative agreement is we managed to create awareness and foster experience with the new model to be adopted by libraries. It is from zero to transformative agreement, because we never experienced transformative agreement in a collective model for 21 universities. And we have many in each concept actually organized many meetings because we wanted to increase acceptance levels among participating entities. And we have a targeted engagement so that the transformative agreement can be successfully implemented by all the 20 public universities. Because when the publisher asks whether we would like to have only a number of universities to be included in the framework model, we say no. Because we wanted all the 20 universities to go together and to learn together about the transformative agreement and the impact we should experience the same. That is what we meant to do with transformative agreement. And the chief librarians of the 20 public universities, they are very satisfied because we expand the availability of electronic resources to a wider academic community and the standard package for all. And through the usage statistic, we can tell this transformative agreement is contributing well to all the 20 public universities. And we provided publishing opportunities for at least 1,400 open access articles to enhance visibility. This is not a one-year approach. This is overall approach 1,400 for 20 universities. And if you can tell that there are universities with only 7 articles to start with, and there are universities with huge number of publication because they can actually publish a lot based on their researchers' capability. So I think we learned about quite an arguments on transformative agreement. And recently, we also received feedback from our own researchers regarding the arrangement, the model. But I would like to share the critical success factors into our the first transformative agreement. Because without these CSF critical success factors, I don't think we can reach up to this level and implementation level in 2025 and 2026. The first one is allocation of funding. Concept implemented multi-funded payment model to support open access publishing initiative. So we have one source for read subscription, but we have contribution from the rest, the ministry and the rest for publishing allocation. So this shows to come to this consensus, we have many surveys going out to all the 20 public universities, and we have engagement with the Deputy Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation as well, because we don't want the publishing quota not being optimized by universities. And secondly, it is a support from publishers that also help us to make things happen. Because what happened to the first transformative agreement is, I think anybody dealing with serials, subscription, electronic resources subscription, even in one institution, you have a lot of engagement to do to at last receive the model that suit the institution. Imagine concept need to deal with so many institutions, so many group of stakeholders, the researchers, the librarians, the serious librarians, and the administrator, the financial administrators, for example. And since 2023, it comes back and forth, again and again on the discussion. And I think the publishers actually listen to us. Without them listening to us, I don't think we can have our own unique framework for Malaysia. So I would like to say thank you for them for supporting our requirements from time to time until we actually satisfied with the last model, the final model. And the third CSF is the operating structure of concept. Because we have for myself, I'm handling the expert and negotiation committee. So we don't work in silo because we need to report to the steering committee. And the steering committee actually being chaired by the chairman of for the Council of Deputy Vice Chancellors for Research and Innovation. And he actually linked us to the 20 public universities Deputy Vice Chancellors for Research and Innovation. And we make presentation to them at all levels. And the steering committee helped a lot in determining whether the proposed model can actually fit in our ecosystem, the Malaysian higher education, the public universities ecosystem. And last, chairing the committee on experts and negotiation, I believe that we receive good trust because we have ongoing engagement with the Council of Public Universities Chief Librarians and also another committee called MOLEC, the Electronic Resources Consortium MOLEC, Malaysian Electronic Resources Consortium. And I think without trust, we are not going anywhere. Once we have the transformative agreement, now we are looking at read and publish agreement. Without trust, you can't even have anyone, discussing how to achieve the goals that we already set for concept. And engagement was carried out in various platforms. In my university, that became the secretariat for the Committee on Negotiation and Expert areas, we have people that answering questions and clarifies on arguments and so on. And I believe we've gone through that and we have good trust from our stakeholders. But the bigger picture of open access is something else. I believe it's not only the open access publishing. We are having a dedicated committee on open access, chaired by appointed chief librarian of the public universities. And this committee last year, successfully developed a framework, an open access policy for thesis mandated by the Ministry of Higher Education for the 20 public universities and going to extend to all the universities who are having this thesis output in their institution. So this is not concept working alone. Concept also working closely with the Committee on Open Access. They are actually looking at diverse projects. I believe other areas they are working is on open educational resources, OER, Diamond Open Access Journal, open access books, and expansion to all the higher education community is another area that they are very careful on the planning and everything. And the committee also currently successfully developed and established an open access platforms. This is not only meant for thesis, I believe it's going to expand to other open access content as well. And we are not looking into the 20 public universities alone. We are looking at providing access to the global community, and for sure it's going to enhance visibility of our researchers and also the institutions. Impact of open access publishing is something that we share from time to time. we actually presented the transformative agreement impact to our stakeholders, to researchers, to the Deputy Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation. In fact, Chief Librarians actually presented in the Senate meeting, in the executive meeting, and also in the Library Committee meeting, to show that collectively the transformative agreement initiated by Concept is now contributing to a big impact for universities in terms of how the publication reached the global communities. And the final one is number 5, is easier said than done, is readiness and competencies, because transformative agreement and read and publish comes in various models. Every time we wanted to implement a new model, we have to really educate our members and our stakeholders as well. And the way we see things, that competencies are core areas now for librarians to talk to their management, to influence, to convince their researchers about our initiative and so on. So this ongoing effort done by Concept. I personally actually having online meeting with the chief librarians, sometimes weekly meetings with them to make sure they are well aware of their model and they actually develop their competencies. But most important thing is we want the library community, the chief librarians, the serious librarians, and all level in the library talk at par with the researchers. Because transformative agreements are not new to researchers. They've been published with their counterpart, with their collaborators, in the global universities. So we want the librarians to actually manage to convince and to advise them on best practices for selecting journals and so on. And I actually quote Henry Ford quotation on coming together is a beginning. We thought when we have Concept, we are coming together, but it's only a start. And staying together is a progress, because whatever model you're going to convince them to introduce to them is still a progress. But having everyone collectively into one initiative is a success. So thank you everyone for listening to this presentation. Thank you again. Back to you, Linda.
Masmin, huge thanks for that. It was really interesting. We do have a question for you, but I'm going to leave it until after Chris's presentation because it's quite a complicated question. You got lots of support there, Masmin, lots of thumbs up and claps all the way through. So thank you very much indeed. So Chris Chan probably doesn't need any introduction to our viewers, but he's the University Librarian at Hong Kong Baptist University, and he has a team of about 80 staff. And he has worked at that library for 17 years. And he has an impressive record behind him, just like Masmin. So, Chris, without any further delay, would you like to give us your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda, for that kind introduction, and thanks, Masmin, too, for the excellent presentation. I learned a lot about Malaysia's efforts in the open access space, and thanks also to De Gruyter, Brill, and Goldleaf for the invitation. So I will be sharing kind of my, I guess, personal reflections on open access models. But I might give you a bit of context about my institution first. So as mentioned, I've been at HKBU for about 17 years. HKBU is a mid-sized comprehensive university. We've got about 14,000 students and 700 full-time academics. So I always like to say not too big, not too small, just the right size to really progress in and contribute to many areas. And in the 17 years that I've been here, we've obviously seen a lot of effort and progress in terms of open access. So in my presentation, I'm going to go through the common models. I'm going to assume the audience is very familiar with the different models: green, gold, diamond, open access. So I won't explain them in detail, but again, really just provide my personal reflections on how those models have worked for us at HKBU, and a little bit more broadly in Hong Kong as well. So to give you a bit of context about Hong Kong's open access landscape, we have 8 government-funded universities in Hong Kong, including HKBU. HKBU is one of the 8, and a growing number of private universities as well. That is, the stated government aim is to expand the number of private universities. And right now, in terms of open access, our main funding body, the Research Grants Council, they do actually have an open access plan in place. But I think the ultimate conclusion of that plan is to adopt what they call the encouragement model, which essentially means that they encourage us to go for open access without necessarily providing any hard, money to help us in that, to work towards that end. But having said that, they are supportive of open access. They recognize the benefits that it brings to institutions individually, and of course to society, humankind more broadly. So our Research Grants Council does actually have an open access requirement for research that it funds, and it's had that in place for a very, very long time. I think at least since 2014, I can say with confidence, but it doesn't really have a strict enforcement mechanism. So it's kind of buried on page 9 or something of the agreement that academics sign when they accept the funding. So many faculty are not even aware of this OA requirement. So at the institutional level, most of the institutions do have some sort of, if not open access policy, some encouragement for faculty to make their research open access. And in HKBU's case, we do have a formal open access policy, which I helped to formulate way back in 2017. But similar to the RGC requirement, it's not strictly enforced. So compliance is a big challenge, I think, in Hong Kong when it comes to open access. And you can contrast that with some other countries like the UK and the US, where funding bodies have much, much stricter mandates when it comes to making research output open access. So the first model I wanted to reflect on is the green OA route. And some universities are really emphasizing the green route to OA because it is seen as in theory, very cost effective, relying on publisher policies that allow self-archiving of author manuscripts in institutional repositories, sometimes with an embargo period, but it does fulfill the ultimate objective of making research output open access. But continuing with my theme of compliance, faculty compliance is a really big challenge when it comes to green open access, because we're really relying on the faculty to send us those manuscripts. And without that participation, repositories are incomplete. You have a very sort of scattershot approach to research being OA. So those universities that are really pursuing it, they tend to have very powerful mandates from the very top of their university leadership in order to drive that compliance. The encouragement alone really, really doesn't work for green OA. That would be my personal reflection in sort of 10 years of trying to get our faculty to send us their manuscripts. It's a big struggle to get them to comply. And certainly there is, again, speaking only for HKBU, there's currently no appetite to do anything what I guess it would be characterized as extreme, like linking submission of manuscripts to the annual review process, and like you won't get your pay rise or your tenure unless you comply with these mandates. Nothing like that has ever even been suggested, certainly at HKBU. And even when faculty do comply, there are sometimes unintended consequences. And there's one example, it's a few years ago now, but it really stands out in my memory, that a faculty member came back to the library. They had complied with the mandate. They'd given us their manuscript. It had been in our repository for a number of years, but they wanted it to be withdrawn. And I asked this professor, well, why? She said it was being cited too frequently. And of course, that's great. And you can see the repository is serving its purpose. It's open access and it's getting noticed, it's getting cited, but they were citing the repository version, not the version of record. And of course, one thing that's very important to faculty is the number of citations that their articles accrue in Scopus and Web of Science. So for this particular article, she said, please remove it from the repository. I need these citations to go to where it will be counted for the purposes of promotion of tenure. So I love Green OA in theory, especially when publishers do not have an embargo. It could theoretically be a very quick and cost-effective way of making research open access, but compliance and the version of record concerns remain real obstacles. So moving on to transformative agreements, which Masmin's presentation talked a lot about, and we've seen a lot of similar challenges too, so I think you'll see a lot of the same points reflected here. We've had a bit of experience with them. So there's my banner headline. At HKBU, since 2021, we've managed to make 640 plus of our HKBU authored articles open access via transformative agreements, which I think is a great result. Although I do have to put it in context, probably over that period, there were many thousands of articles published by HKBU authors. So there's still a long way to go in terms of making the transformation. And I'll elaborate more on that in the next slide, which focuses on the challenges. And I wanted to mention Hong Kong's consortium, which is JULAC. If you're curious, it's the Joint University Librarians Advisory Committee. So this is the organization of the 8 government-funded university libraries in Hong Kong. And my colleagues on the committee that deals with these agreements has done an outstanding job. You know, in the past few years, they have negotiated collectively 18 agreements with various publishers. I hasten to add, very few of those deals have all 8 participating. You know, for whatever reason, not every library will participate, but the consortium has negotiated 18 agreements. And I do want to acknowledge the efforts of Consortial, the committee, which is led by the University of Hong Kong, their university librarian, Ms. Flora Ng. So Flora and my colleagues have done an excellent job negotiating. And it's a lot of work. You know, I'm not directly involved, but I hear from colleagues, you know, the back and forth with publishers. Some of these deals were literally years in the making, years of negotiations to arrive at a point where we had something that we could accept. And I've certainly seen at HKBU a lot of support from senior management, because we can really demonstrate the cost avoidance. So we're doing that admittedly a bit crudely by sort of looking at the APC list prices and then comparing that with the publication fees that we're actually paying in these transformative agreements. And we can often demonstrate not savings. I think it's unfair to characterize them as savings, because it's actually an extra expense, but we could say cost avoidance, because we're getting this open access done at a much lower price than if researchers were individually paying the list APC prices. So, and a lot of positive feedback from faculty. They love these deals, and they always ask, when is XXX publisher going to have a deal, because I publish a lot with them. So positive feedback. Having said that, a lot of challenges. I'll try not to spend too long on this slide, but I do kind of have a lot to say here as well, and kind of echoing many of the points that Masmin made. I think one of the big problems that I have is the fact that they're called transformative agreements, right? Because the idea is to transform the model from libraries paying subscriptions for paywall content to libraries paying APCs for open access content, with the idea being eventually everything will be open access. But that transformation, it seems to be actually going further and further into the distance, because read costs continue to rise, and publishers tell us, well, that's because we have more subscription content now as well. But I feel like, well, when is this transformation going to be complete, or are we just going to spend more and more money? Masbin mentioned the tokens, and this is where I have big problems with transformative agreements, because the way tokens work, I do feel like libraries we end up in a lose-lose situation, because when these negotiations happen, we're asked, and often these are potentially 3-year deals, so we're being asked, well, HKBU Library, in 2029, how many articles do you expect your faculty to publish in our journals? And we have no idea. We would, of course, it's an educated guess, because of course we look at how many we had in the past, etc. But inevitably, we either purchase too many tokens, and so we feel like, oh, we kind of, we could have negotiated a lower fee for the published portion, or, as commonly happens, because our researchers are so productive and they're getting better and better, too few, and then we end up, oh gosh, we've run out. I need to go and ask the provost for more money, which is never a fun conversation to have. And well, of course, the other option is don't top it up, and then there are no more tokens. But it just seems so capricious to say to a faculty member, well, we've run out of tokens. It's a shame your article wasn't accepted in January, because that's when our tokens are refreshed. It just seems very, very random to sort of say to faculty, well, we've run out of tokens, sorry. It's a question of equity, I think. Also, administrative burden. I don't think I need to spend too much time talking about that, but both on the library side and the publisher side, just tracking the tokens and often doing things like, oh, well, we've run out, but can we use the ones from next year in advance? And those turn into sort of side negotiations. The fourth challenge, one that's been more and more pertinent in recent years, is gold OA exclusions. So there are cases now, and there's one case where the deal used to include gold journals, but the renewed deal did not include gold journals, which becomes very confusing for faculty. And because we try to bring a simple message to faculty, we say, oh, we have an OA agreement now with this publisher. And of course, we'll have the note that says, oh, it excludes gold journals. Many faculty, if you ask them, they don't really know what the difference is between a gold and a hybrid journal. So we have had incidents, one particular incident where a faculty did write to me and say, I've had this article accepted in the gold journal, and I've been told I need to pay for it. My impression was the library would pay for it. And it turns out, they had just not read the details of that. So that created a very difficult situation that we needed to work through. Last but not least, and I'm sure my Hong Kong colleagues always scold me when I say things like Hong Kong universities are relatively well resourced, because I give the impression that we're not. And in fact, the budgets of the universities in Hong Kong are being cut by 2%. So that's why I put in parentheses, for now, we are relatively well resourced. But many institutions worldwide, regionally, certainly, they can't even entertain this idea of paying more for transformative agreements. That last bit there is just, again, my personal reflection that in an ideal situation, the ideal TA, if publishers ask me, well, what do you want from a transformative agreement? No tokens, just unlimited APCs, and no restrictions on the journals that faculty can publish in. I know that's of course, that's ideal, and I know publishers are dealing behind the scenes with lots of different factors, but from my perspective, that would be perfect. Now, an alternative model that's been getting a lot of attention recently is subscribe to open. Although it's not a new concept, the original article proposing it, I believe, was in Learned Publishing. So I think it's a Wiley journal, but proposed back in 2019, really piloted by annual reviews. And this is a model that doesn't rely on altruism, which is probably a good approach. It relies on actors in the space just taking care of their self-interest. I said I wouldn't talk too much about how things are structured, but S2O is new enough, I guess, to give a short précis. So essentially, OA is enabled if enough subscriptions are maintained each year. So as long as enough institutions subscribe to a journal, the publisher will make it OA. So it's different in the sense that OA is contingent on enough subscriptions being maintained, which could cause issues with mandates, because if faculty are publishing in a journal expecting it to be open access, you could encounter issues where, in the particular year that they actually publish, there weren't enough subscriptions, and the paywall comes down. But I have seen cases where that has been worked around, where for subscribing institutions, their authors have guaranteed OA regardless of the final S2O status of the journal for that particular year. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this approach. What's really attractive is, for libraries, it's just business as usual, right? Just maintain subscriptions to journals that you find useful. And it also shows, or we can also demonstrate, we are receiving something in return for our money, especially if our authors do have kind of preferential or guaranteed open access, because that's a big question sometimes with our finance offices, like why should we pay to make something open? That's a benefit to the public. What's the benefit for the university? So again, cautiously enthusiastic, but at this current point in time, relatively few publishers offer S2O as an alternative OA model. Last but certainly not least is Diamond Open Access. Again, I won't go into too much details of what this means, but in a nutshell, no fees for authors or readers. And so this needs to be sustained by institutions. So here we come back to, yes, altruism again. So institutions, societies, or associations who are willing to bear the costs of scholarly publication, which, as we all know, don't just include the platform, but obviously maintaining things like peer review, editorial standards, etc. So, of course, we always recognize that these are real and significant costs. But one question that's been certainly on my mind is, considering all angles, instead of spending more and more money on TAs, what if libraries directed those resources towards building and sustaining OA platforms? Now, one challenge there, of course, would be getting academics to buy into that, right? Because there are so many established journals published by places like Springer Nature, right? The prestigious journals. So this would require a lot of buy-in from academics to sort of support that. Okay, let's not publish in our normal journals, but let's move to these new open platforms. And here I'd like to give some examples from Hong Kong, both spearheaded by the Chinese University of Hong Kong Library under the leadership of their university librarian, Mr. Benjamin Munier. He's done some really outstanding work, first establishing Open Books Hong Kong, which brought together the university presses of CUHK, CityU, and the University of Hong Kong to make books openly accessible. But more recently, just soft launched, I think a month ago or something like that, the Open Journals Hub Hong Kong. So this is really intended to be exactly that, a Diamond OA journal platform where it's free to publish and free to read. So very early days for both of these projects, but I think a very, very worthwhile endeavor to provide a venue for journals to come and have a robust platform. And I think libraries are very well placed to serve as the custodians of such platforms because of our knowledge of scholarly publishing, preservation, etc. Of course, the costs over time, whether it can be sustained, I think is very much an open question which I would love to discuss more, because we've reached the end of my slides. Thank you very much.
Chris, that was wonderful. Thank you. A very dynamic and clear presentation. I think we will start actually with picking up on that last idea, because You mentioned putting the money in other ways. Now, you probably are aware of the fact, well, you're certainly aware of the fact that transformative agreements weren't supposed to be the thing that publishing finished up with. And there's a lot of work going on in Europe, particularly by the University of Stockholm, which leads up the BIBSOM consortium, on what comes next. And it appears to some libraries that publishers are dragging their heels over this, and they want the transformative agreement to be the end stop, whereas in fact it was meant to be a stepping stone to an even simpler, I say simpler ironically, it was meant to be simple, an even simpler system that was more transparent and possibly a kind of one-stop shop. So what's your view on that? Do you think we're getting any further towards transformative agreements turning to something else? And Chris, I will start with you and then I'll come on to you, Masmin. Thank you.
I think I sort of alluded to this in the presentation that it seems to be getting further away, frankly, Linda. So I'm less optimistic than I was, say, 5 years ago when we first started embarking on these transformative agreements. And that is certainly how I pitched it to the university senior management, that this would be, as you say, a stepping stone on the way to a future where we're not paying subscription fees anymore. We are only paying for the open access, the APCs, for our faculty to have their articles open access. In hindsight, maybe that was overly optimistic, because as we've seen in the intervening period, just the administrative complexities, the questions around the sustainability of that funding model, and the fluctuations yearly in our research output. Now, I've said to publishers whenever I've had the chance to speak to them, like, we're happy to revisit the pricing. If we publish way more than was expected, we're happy to renegotiate those. But they seem very wedded to the idea of tokens, and I know why, because they have a sort of a defined liability, and if we're more productive than we expect, then we have to buy more tokens. But I think without flexibility, the transformative agreements are just going to ossify and just become more complex over time, which is why I'm very much open to alternative models at the moment. But I'll pause there to let Masmin have her say.
Just a small plug, de Gruyter Brill does have a subscribe to open model. So Masmin, you've achieved an incredibly complex task of getting these libraries to work together. And as you say, you're on your first big transformative agreement. Has your consortium, your ministry, have they thought beyond that to what you might possibly get after transformative agreements, or do you also think that really we aren't going to get beyond the transformative agreement and it's here to stay?
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Chris, for a very insightful presentation and also thought on this transformative agreement. Yeah, I think we read about a lot of arguments on what is after transformative agreement, and transformative agreement is not actually help to achieve our original goal. But the way I see things is it's really on how the framework being designed for libraries. In our case, in our experience, Springer must be it's like really like making transformative agreement applicable to all, to all the 20 public universities. And I'm doing a brief survey also on the arguments on transformative agreement, but yet institutions are still having TA, maintaining TA in their yearly budget and everything. But I believe TA, if we actually making the read subscription worthwhile for the universities, I think that will be great. It's helping the library in a way for that purpose. Because currently in Malaysia, there are universities who wanted to have resources, huge resources, but restricted by the allocation, like Chris mentioned, our resource, right? Quite limited. I think for me, it's really on the framework, the flexibility of the framework. You don't actually apply what you do in Europe to Malaysia, for example. So that's the interesting part, the challenging part of the consortium, to recommend a good framework, and publishers need to listen to us. And I think the Diamond Open Access, the subscribe to open is now here to be evaluated by CONSAC in the future. That will be my feedback on your question, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you. And while you're there, Mazmin, we have a question that's just for you, which is, could you elaborate a bit on the multi-funders, and does that involve the research department from each university or funding from the government and ministries? How do you do that?
It took years for us to do that, but when CONSAC actually already have our clear direction on the second phase that we're going towards transformative agreement, whatever under read subscription only will not attract us. We want it to be read and published. So what we do is we have a very good deal on read subscription being funded by the ministry for all the 20 public universities, honestly on huge saving for read subscription. If I mention now, maybe Springer got, I don't know, they might not like what I mentioned. But for the research, for the publishing activity, we have some funded by the government, allocated into different number of publication for the 20 universities, and we have some contributed by, it's according to the universities. If University A would like the research department to fund, then the research department will fund for the publishing. And for my universities, the library fund the publishing activity, because we have savings from the read subscription. That is what happened in Malaysia, but saying that is quite easy, but coming into one framework and one final proposal is really a challenging process for us. Yeah. If I answer your question, Linda.
I think you did. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you both mentioned books, and open access for books is much more of a stumbling block for publishers and for authors than articles are. Chris, you touched on books in the context of Diamond Open Access, I think. Are you quite often asked about open access books, or do you think a viable model for books can be found?
It has come up, Linda, on occasion, especially, and I do feel well, it is a question of equity too, because there are many disciplines where the book or the monograph is a more important research output versus the journal article. So the inquiry has often come from folks in the arts and humanities and the social sciences. We see that the library is putting a lot of money and effort into supporting open access for journals. What about my book, that I'm publishing? And of course, publishers do offer book processing charges as well, but then we inquire about, well, how much is that? And it's a lot of money. And senior management of the university, and I'm not speaking just about HKVU, but generally they look at that and they don't see the value proposition, because we know that a lot of the university rankings depend on a lot of the metrics for journals, but books not so much. And so they will entertain, okay, article processing charges for top tier journals. Yes, that's something we can entertain. When you say, and like for a book, it's often 5 or 6 times a typical article processing charge.
At least.
And well, there's, yeah, at least, and there's not really any demonstrable benefit, at least from the perspective, the narrow perspective of the university rankings. Of course, there's benefits in terms of the sharing of knowledge, etc. It's much more difficult to get support for that. So our response to that has often been, yeah, we can't really help with that, which is why I did want to highlight CUHK, Chinese University of Hong Kong's efforts. We would also support that. HKView does not have a university press, so if we did, I'm sure we would be supporting that too. I think it's a really great initiative for those presses to come together and kind of pool their resources to and show their support for open access books. But I agree with you, Linda, it's a really tricky problem, and it's one I think we need to address given the importance of books to the humanities.
Thank you. And Masmin, you mentioned books in the context of open access across the world. Has your consortium or your library considered helping with publishing books open access, or do you just not have the financial reach to be able to do that?
I think in the concept, thank you, Linda, for the question. I think in the concept framework, there are going to be initiative on open educational resources, but for open access book, I think the university press actually is not looking into that direction because of the motivation is more of income generation for the university. So I think if we're going to have the kind of initiative for open access book, a lot of engagement and awareness on how actually open access books will give impact to researchers as much as what they are doing with the articles for rankings and so on. I think we need to do that because we need those contribution from researchers on on open access book as well. Because if you look at articles, journal articles, still in the transformative agreement or read and publish, we are still looking at quartile. The impact of the journal's impact, whether if we have like 200 articles, then they will start asking how many now in Q1, how many in Q2. So I think it's going to be the same with open access book. We are talking about quality at the same dimension, but on how researchers going to look at their open access book is something that giving the same benefit as much of their scholarly work on articles. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. And I will start with you on this, Chris, but Masmin said that that publishers have been helpful, well, Springer Nature in particular, have been helpful when negotiating that agreement. Do you think there is more that publishers could do to help you? And do you think they do take account of your geographical location, your particular circumstances? In other words, that you're not either from Europe or the US, that you are from somewhere else altogether. And do they really take that into account?
Ooh, give me a tricky question here, Linda. I do think the vast majority of publishers do negotiate in good faith, but I think there is sometimes a gap between libraries and institutions and publishers when it comes to negotiating these deals. Whether they take our position in Asia into account, I'm not sure. I guess I don't have the knowledge to understand what the differences might be when it comes to the Asian context. Certainly, again, I'm going to get myself into trouble with my fellow Hong Kong librarians, I think we're not too far off Western countries in terms of our resourcing. So in that sense, we have some of maybe a similar environment that we're coming towards, or coming from rather. But yeah, I hope that publishers can understand that we can't just keep raising costs year after year after year, that there have to be some way to control costs for libraries, and some way that we can better demonstrate the really some return on this really significant investment that we're putting in to open access. So to not so narrowly focus on, well, this is how much the APC is, this is how many tokens you can have, but to look at the relationship more holistically. Like sustaining a relationship with the library is not about making sure you meet the targets for this quarter or for this financial year, but to have a longer term vision. And I'm going to oversimplify here, but in my experience, university presses, society publishers seem to be better at that than the for-profit publishers. That's a generalization. We have some very good deals with for-profit publishers as well, but I feel like the society publishers, university presses can take that longer-term view. So yes, a sustainable partnership, not just maximizing revenue in the short term.
Thank you very much. And Masmin, I know from previous conversations that you have had difficulty with some publishers. I'm not asking you to mention any names, but what were those difficulties? Why were they not easy to negotiate with?
I think they are imposing their own framework. What they did in Europe, for example, is applicable to Asian, for example. So that is, I think, the most difficult part in negotiating, because publisher will say that it works well in this region, and why don't it work this Malaysian context, you see. So that, and even so, we are talking about transformative agreement and everything. There are publishers who refuse to provide us with a model. And this is quite funny because some of them are making excuses and publication output, that if you publish less, then you will pay a lot more than for subscription fee. So this is what the challenge we have with the difficult publishers. But what happened now, when there are good initiatives happening in Malaysia, I see it's a good changes also from the publishers trying to, I think, buy in our requirements so that they can be more flexible. In fact, in my negotiation with the publishers, they used to listen to me saying this: please be kind, because we are not going anywhere by you imposing your own framework and your own motivation. And looking at, I think if I can add a bit on Chris' feedback just now on the regional, influence of TA. I think what happened in Malaysia is something that the publishers also want things to happen for Asia. And this is how they really help us in a way, trying to fulfill our requirements, and it's a 2 or 3 years deal just to find the right framework. So there are an influence of where the libraries are or where the consortium is operating. Thank you, Linda, for the question. I think I hope I answered your question.
No, that was really illuminating. Thank you very much, Masmin. So we have a question for Chris here. With the significant amount of admin works, tokens and other issues, do you think that the library will pivot back to green OA? You mentioned there's an inclination to green OA at Law University, but it has its own issues too. I should say in Europe there are very few countries that support green OA, but Denmark is one of them.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be unlikely to pivot back to green OA. I think our experience with the difficulties, which I touched upon in the presentation, are just a little bit too much, because one of the attractions of the transformative agreements is there's not really much effort required on the part of faculty beyond sort of when the email comes in, say, yes, I accept the the use of the token. Whereas with green OA, we need to get the manuscripts from them. And that communication process is just so fraught, and it's something you have to do again and again. I remember clearly when it was my responsibility to actually go to faculty, you know, I sent what I thought was a very clear email explaining what we were asking for. We need the post peer review manuscript. You know, it's the final Word document that you sent to the publisher just before your article was accepted. Oh no, at post acceptance. And 9 times out of 10, if they replied to you, they would send you the PDF of the version of record. It was like, what's, you know, did you read the email sort of reaction? But that's to be expected. You know, faculty are extremely busy. They don't have, we shouldn't expect them to learn what the difference is. What is a post peer review? What's a post print? What's a preprint? It's not their domain, and it shouldn't be. So I do think green just imposes, now you can again sort of coerce them, which I don't think we should, you know, through you know, the annual review system or something like that. But I think the burden that it places on faculty, it's not something that I would be enthusiastic about, you know, pivoting back towards green OA.
Thank you. And Masmin, do you have to do a lot of training of faculty? Do they understand the transformative agreement?
I actually do this, the consortium do this from the, what we call, from the publishers' initiatives, that we invite huge crowd for the, you know, for training at the Ministry of Higher Education, for example. And we do have sort of training by the universities itself from time to time, to not really to educate on transformative agreement, Linda, I must say, but it's what are you getting from the transformative agreement? You're getting free APC, that kind of training that we are providing. Like in what journals will you, you know, get your articles published, and knowing that they don't have to pay APC is something that you don't have to really train. Isn't it, Chris? I believe. So it is not on the model itself, but what are they getting from the transformative agreement that we actually communicate with them? Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't very clear there. I meant the implications. I mean, for example, we find that a lot of authors think that they're relinquishing their copyright if they publish something open access. So I meant that kind of training as well. But thank you both very much for answering all those questions. I don't think we have any other questions, do we, Annika?
No, we don't.
Thank you. Well, that was a hugely illuminating and dynamic and insightful webinar. Thank you both very much indeed. It was a real treat for all the people who attended, I know. And of course, it will be published on YouTube and it will reach a much wider audience eventually. So, Masmin, thank you. Chris, thank you very much. And
thank you.
Thank you again to the Gruyter Brill. There will be another one of these seminars in June. We'll put the date on the recording of this seminar. And then there will be a final one in October for the Asian librarians, I should say. So thank you also to the audience for attending, and thank you for your questions. And I hope you have a good rest of the day. We're getting lots of claps and thumbs ups now.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us today.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.